coalition to make sure that we both stop this, but don't stop America from being America.
Let me go to Magdi in the audience. You are a student here at Emory?
Yeah, at Emory University.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to reiterate the fact that not only is it sick that these terrorists have killed so many people, but that they've used my religion, Islam, to perpetuate these acts. I mean, I'm an Arab American and I'm Muslim, and I just want to tell all Americans that the American and Muslim community is in complete solidarity with you and in complete support, and that we ourselves are going to help fight these terrorists.
And Congressman Reynolds, I have an email here from Aaron in Iowa who says, I wonder how the United States government will keep the balance of freedom versus security. I fear that this crisis may give authorities power to infringe on freedom of speech and right to privacy.
Bobby, first of all, to the Atlanta firemen, I just want to tell you how proud you would be of the Fire Department of New York. They've done a stellar job. I was with the President yesterday, and I want to salute all the firemen who have done such a great job, along with the cops and the emergency teams in New York. And to the veteran, I just want to share that this country is united. This week alone, the Congress, Congressman Nadler from New York City, I from the other end of my state, from two different parties, came before the Congress and addressed for the country and the world how outraged the Congress is on the terrorist acts of our country. In addition, we have appropriated $40 billion to help New York City and our country rebuild and begin to take on some of the additional burdens that are going on in both New York City and the Pentagon. And finally, we have given the President the ability under resolution to have use of force as he sees fit as our Commander-in-Chief to seek retaliation on the terrorists who have caused this damage, loss of life, and injury to our country.
Let me take just a break here for a moment to get a news update from Kabul, Afghanistan. CNN's Nick Robertson is in Kabul, and he joins us by video phone from there. He is the only outside journalist remaining in Afghanistan. Nick, what can you tell us from there at this hour?
Well, Bobby, the very latest we have from here is neighboring Iran has closed its borders with Afghanistan. That added to the fact that there is already an increase in buying of food supplies here in Afghanistan, food prices going up, and the fact that the Taliban in Afghanistan are moving to a position of high animosity with neighboring Pakistan because Pakistan has agreed to allow the United States full access to the country. There's a possibility the borders could close with Pakistan too, and that would cut off essentially pretty much all food supplies getting into here. So for the people of Afghanistan, the average people here traumatized by 22 years of ongoing conflict, the days and weeks ahead are looking pretty bleak at the moment, Bobby.
I would assume then, Nick, that the Afghani people feel that an attack of some sort is imminent?
That is generally the feeling, yes. Certainly their spiritual leader, Mullah Omar, addressed them all on the radio last night. He rarely does that. It was a 15-minute address. And essentially he was rallying them, telling them to put their trust in Allah and have faith and not to be afraid if they are attacked. But essentially telling them that an attack is quite possible, yes.
I have questions for you, Nick, from folks in the audience. Let me take those. Naima?
Actually, I was wondering if, in knowing that one of the demands placed upon Pakistan was to close its borders to Afghanistan, if the people there are fearful that they will have nowhere to flee, if they're among the innocent people who are fearful for their lives if there's an attack on Afghanistan.
Well, certainly some people have been fleeing in the direction of Pakistan already. The problem, of course, for so many Afghans, the economy here, as many people know, is completely ruined. And many people are really too poor to consider even fleeing beyond the confines of this capital, Kabul, never mind all the way to Pakistan. So while it would be a concern that they may not be able to get across the borders, for many people it's a far greater concern just to even try and get out of this city. They don't have the money, many of them. Many of them really live every day wondering how they're going to put food on their plates at the end of the day.
Mohammed.
Hi, I would like to know if the Afghani people themselves feel bin Laden is responsible for these terrorist acts with the approval of the Taliban.
Most people here, and I can't answer your question directly, but most people here generally feel that Afghanistan does owe asylum to Osama bin Laden because of his assistance to the Mujahideen fight in the 1980s, which sought to expel the 10-year Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. So they feel that they do owe him a place to stay. And some people we talk to as well say that he is a faithful Muslim, and therefore, you know, we should keep the door open to him. That is what our faith practice is, and that's what we should do. That's the interpretation, and of course there are many interpretations put on the Holy Quran by various administrations in Islamic countries around the world, but that's the way it's interpreted here, that there still should be an open door, there still should be a place for Osama bin Laden to stay. The government, of course, telling the people in the daily radio addresses that Osama bin Laden couldn't possibly have been involved in such a complicated exercise. They say, number one, he couldn't have trained the pilots. Number two, he couldn't have communicated on such a scale as to put in place such a complex set of events.
Is it confirmed, Nick, that Osama bin Laden is right now at this moment in Afghanistan?
There's no reason to believe he's left. He's been here for the last 5 years. He's very close to the Taliban leadership, and there's no reason to believe that he's left at this time.
Mary Catherine, question.
Yes, my question is, I'm wondering what is the general feeling of the people of Afghanistan? Are they afraid of what may be happening to them sometime soon?
They are afraid. It goes in two ways. They're afraid because they know that it's just going to bring utter hardship for them, and they lived through 22 years of it. On the other hand, they've been in 22 years of war, and to go into another phase of war, for many of them, it's almost a continuation. There's a much more ready acceptance of it. It's very difficult to understand the psyche of a country and of individuals who've been through such a prolonged conflict and seen so much hardship. Most people here will have lost loved ones in the fighting over the years. Most people here will have likely had homes damaged and been forced to move at some time in the last 20 years. So in that context, people here are so traumatized that there is an acceptance of what might happen, but there is concern at the same time over personal safety. They really have no concept of what scale of attack could happen.
All right, Nick Robertson. We have one more question? Okay, let me go up here quickly to Harold.
I just want to say to the people that we are united together again, and with these foreign countries that we have to battle with every day and furnish them part of the living, and for all the people that are here because they want to be here. I say when we tell a country that for their leaders to turn over certain people, that we need to be tried and be taken out of this situation, then I feel that if they do not do that, then they should retaliate. And this cause here today, they definitely should be great retaliation against them.
Nick Robertson, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate all your insights into this. We'll be talking to you again soon. Let me go quickly to Bill Hemmer in New York City. Now, Bill is at the Jacob Javits Center, where folks have been trying desperately to volunteer to relieve tired rescue workers and firemen. Bill, what's going on?
Bobby, we have talked to hundreds of volunteers who are disappointed, but we have just found 5 men who are quite successful in their endeavors. We have with us Mike and Jim Donovan, they're brothers. Their father, Tom, is with him as well. And then Frank and Joe over here. The Donovans are from Brooklyn, and Frank and Joe come from northern New Jersey. They just came out of the site down there by the World Trade Centers. They are volunteers. You're in there for about 2 days' time. Right. How did thousands of people get turned away, and you guys managed to get success to work inside?
We got here early, and we hopped a city bus that brought us down, and we were lucky. A platoon of firemen, police officers came onto the bus with us. When we got off the bus, they went to the right, we went to the left and right into the site.
Tell us about what's happening in there right now in the efforts. What can you describe about the situation?
Right now, all the cranes and the bigger machinery are running, and they're picking steel out, they're cutting the bigger pieces of steel, and Once all of that gets out, then the bucket brigades go in and they start getting the loose stuff out, and then the welders go in, they start cutting again and burning, and the cranes are picking everything out.
Frank, are they making progress inside there? And if so, how do you measure the progress?
In little pieces. Little pieces. You grab a little area, you clean it, you let them get in there, you let them start saging their equipment, and you start cleaning out more and more, loading it into the trucks, little by little. It's slow going.
Give us an idea for when we talk about this pile of rubble that's been described to us. Are you near the base of the building, or are you still working your way toward it?
In the middle of it. And then we were just picking away and handing out pieces. Whatever you can do, they want us to do. And then today,
we're not at the base of the building.
Right.
We're a good 50 yards, 60 yards away from the building, trying to get to the base of the building, because the building came down onto Church Street, building number 1. It looks like building number 1 came down onto Church Street, just missing the Merrill Lynch building. And so right there on, I guess it would be Liberty and Greenwich.
Okay.
That's about where we are.
Which is right at the base of the building.
Well, it's pretty close,
yeah.
But you still have a good ways to go yet.
Mike, tell me this. We were getting reports that oftentimes work is just told to fall silent and stop. Are you still getting that?
Every now and again. You know, I myself, I be doing what I'm doing, and every once in a while I look up at the smoke and have to stop.
Yeah.
You know,
the hope's there.
Get my thoughts back together and say my little prayer and go back.
Quickly, I want to go to Tom here. You're a World War II veteran. What do you remember about 1941?
Pandemonium. Pearl Harbor. Same thing. It caught us off guard, and everybody didn't know which way to run initially. First day, and then everything clicked in. They hit us on a Sunday. Nobody was in office.
You're in your 70s now. How do you feel today?
Myself, I've seen the whole world go by me. I've seen the Moors change. I've seen the customs change. I've seen the populace of the United States change. We're not the, what did they call it, European eccentric or centric? We're more of a diverse nation than we were.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time today, and best of luck getting back in tomorrow and possibly next week as well. Quickly back to Atlanta now. In more with Bobby Batista. Indeed.
All right, Bill, thanks. And we have our own group of firefighters right here in the audience from the Atlanta Fire Department. And Chris and David, as you watch this unfold, I know as journalists, when something like this happens, we want to be there. It's a draw, you know, for us to be there covering the story. I would imagine in some ways it is for you guys, too, that you want to be there. You want to be able to help, right?
I think every firefighter in the United States wants to be there to help. Well, we have to realize that we have to utilize help in an organized fashion. And there's a tremendous amount of things we can do to help other than just being at the scene. They have that pretty well taken care of. And one thing we have to remember is the families of the victims of not only the firefighters and police officers, but all the civilians are going to need help for many, many months to come. And there's a tremendous amount of things people haven't even thought of as far as helping them weed through the things that happen when you have a loss, paperwork, just dealing with things, getting relatives in and out of town. So that's what we're doing, is organizing our efforts, because we do have people that want to help. We're trying to get lists organized together, and when the appropriate time comes through the International Association of Firefighters or FEMA, we can send people to help with those other types of things, to help the families and the survivors who are left behind.
And David, you were kind of trying to put some perspective on this situation in New York, where they've lost 300 firefighters. And that's a big chunk of the fire department there. You said, I believe, that it would be almost like losing the entire Atlanta fire department?
Well, it'd be like losing the entire shift that's on duty today in Atlanta. We have about 800 firefighters. They have 14,000, but today in Atlanta there's about 220 on duty. Also, the largest loss of life to firefighters prior to this was 27 back in 1947 in Texas City. So this is just unbelievable.
Well, let us just say, by the way, I think we just got a call to duty, by the way, and we just want to say, as they're going out to fight a fire somewhere in Atlanta, that we never say thank you enough for what you guys do. Now is as good a day as any. Let me go to David in the audience. David, your thoughts?
My thoughts, going back to something we talked about earlier as far as men wanting to go and to help out in this cause, this fight, this war. And one thing that I'm willing to do would be to do that, to go and to fight as best I could to end this war on, you want to call it a war on terrorism, but a war on hate, that we can try to cut this off right now so the children that I have one day don't have to see any of the devastation, any of the terror that we've had to go through this week in this country ever again. And I think a lot of young men that are sitting in this audience would hopefully want to say the same things.
Yeah, a lot of them did a little earlier to us. Congressman Nadler, there's no reason to think right now that there's need to reinstitute the draft, but that could come up possibly later.
I would doubt that, but we don't really know. I would hope not. I've never liked the draft, but we don't know. We have restructured our armed forces since the Vietnam War so that for any real conflict, you have to call up reserves. They're integral to the armed forces. We saw that in the Persian Gulf situation. But we are far from having to institute the draft. That would call for, you wouldn't have to do that unless you had a really major land war, which I don't think anybody either wants or anticipates.
Congressman Reynolds, you agree?
I don't see the draft being a factor of being called up into play at this point. I think we need to give the President time as our Commander-in-Chief to move forward on the military buildup, calling of reservists that has occurred today. And we need to just support getting to that military buildup so that the President is ready to go do the retaliation on those terrorists who caused this destruction to our country, of our people, and our buildings.
But I think it's important to say, if I can jump in here, the question isn't simply retaliation. If it's simply retaliation, the way we did a few years back, we sent some cruise missiles to Afghanistan into a pharmaceutical factory in Sudan, that's ineffectual. It would invite further violence against us. This is far more serious. We have been attacked in a very serious way, and our response has to be to destroy the ability of the groups to attack us again. And that's going to take effort, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take our allies as well.
Jeff in the audience, you want to respond?
Bobby?
Yeah. Oh, let me go to Jeff first. Go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing I haven't heard anybody say is that these people have awoken a sleeping giant, and that giant is not going to go back to sleep until whatever needs to be done is done and terrorism is taken out of this country and the world needs to join this giant in getting to the problem and eliminating the problem.
It's very interesting that you said that, because on the floor of the House yesterday, the day before, I quoted Admiral Yamamoto, who was the Japanese commander of the attack on Pearl Harbor, and he was quoted as saying afterward, I think the exact quote was, I fear that all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. And I think that's the situation now.
Bobby, can I get in here?
Yes, go ahead.
Just two sets of comments. One is I've seen running across the bottom so many comments about World War III. And I don't think this is World War III. Remember, the balance of forces then was so different. There was a mighty Germany and a mighty Japan, and huge competition for control of Europe and control of the Pacific, and a mightier United States. And so we fought a world war. I believe that the world is very different today, and the United States has a very different standing among the nations of the world. And this scourge, as grotesque as it is, this scourge of terrorism, is really a phenomena that can be isolated and I believe dealt some serious blows. But I do think that from the discussions I've had with people in the Department of State, that a very thoughtful approach is being worked through. Understand from what we're hearing now, it took these individuals years of planning to do what they did. I believe that the resolve of the United States is great and the resolve of our allies is great. And I believe that if we approach this as we approached, for example, the situation with Kuwait, the President will make his case. Certainly the country will be with him. But I believe we can build a near unanimous coalition throughout the world. And if we do that, and we take the time to do this right, I think that we can deal this problem, this scourge of terrorism, a huge blow, and in fact succeed without a draft without the kind of fear and trauma that many Americans are afraid of and are expressing themselves in,
I
of a
understand.
kind of world war.
Hope you're right. Let me do a couple of emails here. Richard in California, please set up a fund where people across the country can contribute to the rebuilding of the WTC. Many of us would like to be able to contribute a small amount just so we can be a part of it being rebuilt and maybe just a little taller. Heather in Ontario says, I am a Canadian soldier, and I find myself today playing the song Proud to be an American over and over again. This song depicts the strength and pride of the American people, and I think it's appropriate at this time. God bless you all. Mike is on the phone in Vermont. Mike, go ahead.
Yes, Bobby. One of the things I'd like to comment on is that I really think that the restrictions need to be let up a little bit on law enforcement insofar as the FBI and the CIA insofar as their ability to deal with these individuals. You know, the country prohibits the CIA from participating in assassinations, but yet if you had a sniper on a rooftop shooting at the citizens in New York, you know, obviously one would do what had to be done to eliminate that threat and that situation. I think the same needs to be done with terrorism. Once these people are identified, you do the best you can to deal with them, but if need be, they need to be disposed of.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. There are concerns on the other side of this, Peter.
Well, definitely. I'm from northern New Jersey, and my Uncle Jerry is actually a firefighter working at Ground Zero right now. And when all this took place, obviously everyone placed cell phone calls trying to talk to their loved ones. And my father also works in the city, and I couldn't get to him. And I also couldn't find my mother. Luckily, my father was in Philadelphia. And the thing is, there's a lot of us down here from that area, and we don't know really what we can do. You know, we've been giving blood and trying to do fundraisers and things like that. And I think it's very important that all of us really just get together and try and figure out what we can do.
How do you feel about a response?
Try and make this really simple. The way I feel is that an eye for an eye makes the world blind. We need to be very, very careful in what we do because, I mean, we're a very powerful empire, and we could really set off something very terrible that we all fear. So we need to be very, very careful.
And over here to Martin.
Yeah, one of the things I believe we've forgotten as Americans is what's happened to our entire covert intelligence. I haven't heard a word mentioned today about the lack of funding that we have done for human capital and human intelligence. Not a word has been mentioned. We've neutered the CIA, we neutered the defense intelligence, and it's an absolute, should not be a surprise that something was going to happen and we knew nothing about it. We as Americans truly need to come together, as I think we have, and forget all the designations of a black American, Muslim American. We're Americans first and something else after that.
Congressman Reynolds, would you like to address that?
Yeah, the gentleman, I guess in the long-range goal, I'd like to see increased funding for intelligence, something that certainly has been a debate in the past. But we're dealing with a terrorist network throughout the world that is very complex. And we found that 18 individuals were willing to give their life to crash an aircraft into a building to cause the type of destruction they have to our country. And I think the President is preparing us to get ready for what we need to do, as Congressman Nadler said, and what I've said previous, to move forward to eradicate the type of terrorism by radical groups around the world that had the ability to pursue America. And whether it be our country, our embassies, or our military abroad, we've reached the point that we have to go take on the war of this terrorism.
Let me go to the audience.
Can I
Congressman.
say something here?
Go ahead.
We spend a very, very large amount of money on intelligence. The exact amount is classified, so I can't say, but we spend a very large amount on intelligence. We have not neutered the CIA. That's a myth. I think it is fair to say that we probably have grown somewhat complacent, and we're not spending enough on human intelligence as opposed to electronic and satellite intelligence. That's the easy way. It's certainly easier to have a satellite or to spy on electronic communications than it is to try to infiltrate a terrorist organization and get human beings into it. But clearly that we have to place probably a greater reliance on that than we have been.
Florence in the audience.
This comment is directed toward our learning from history. In the last 10 years,
I've had the opportunity to lead Holocaust survivor groups between survivors of both perpetrators and victims in 10 different countries. And one of the things that comes out is that they all wish we had not gone along with the policy of appeasement and containment, but had handled the Nazi enemies as soon as it became apparent what they were trying to do. And what I hope we will do is handle this immediately. I'm also a mediator. There is no mediation with people who are irrational and whose goal is to vandalize and vanquish everyone else.
And I want to get Matthew up here to Matthew in the audience also, who had some thoughts earlier. Matthew, you don't wish to disclose what your nationality is. We certainly respect that.
Well, the importance of not disclosing is what people are talking about as far as retaliation. We need to be careful, and we ask our politicians to also be careful in the reaction that we have. To move into Afghanistan, we have to look at the countries that surround them: China, India, Pakistan. All these countries which have nuclear weapons. It's a very sensitive area. We ask that the Army and the politicians be very sensitive to these areas. We can't just move in with our military force. We have to respect other regions. And so calling for possibly other countries from the Middle East, such as Egypt, to get involved in some kind of action. And again, it is right. It's not against an entire country. It's against individuals, and we need to remember that so that more innocent lives are not lost.
Mm-hmm. Can I get in here for a second, Bobby?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of the things I think is important here is that the attack on America was the attack, as Tony Blair said, on the free world and democracy. And what I see our country doing while the President is our Commander-in-Chief is addressing a military buildup to address our national security concerns. We also have had a global discussion by the President and by the Secretary of State with our nations, first our allies, then NATO.
Let me interrupt you just a moment, Congressman. Forgive me, but we want to go to New York, where Mayor Giuliani is holding a press briefing. Let's listen in.
But although this is a very difficult day and a very emotional one, and only the beginning of what we're going to have to go through, I believe that I emerged from it as the Fire Commissioner does, and I'm sure the Speaker and Congressman King, thank you so much for being with us, like you were yesterday and the day before. I think we all emerged with a lot more strength. I think we realized that we have the strength to deal with this, to overcome it, that our fire department will emerge from it stronger, and so will our city. And I think people should be mournful and sorrowful, but they should also be very encouraged that we have tremendous courage in New York, we have tremendous courage in America, and the courage will be there in our generation as it was in prior generations. This is a horrible, horrible tragedy. These were wonderful men. They were the leadership of our fire department. And I'd like the fire commissioner to say a few words. He's a great fire commissioner. He's done more for the fire department than anyone that I can think of. We have fewer fire deaths in New York City than ever before. Our men and women are safer than they've ever been because of his leadership. And one of the things we're blessed with is having him as our fire commissioner right now.
Thank you. This is a good question because I couldn't hear anything.
What went through your head as you
Oh, I'm sorry.
looked out at the families and the friends and the seniors?
One of the good things about being a commissioner who comes from the department is that you really know how the department works from bottom to top. One of the horrible things about being from the department is that you know all the people so well. I keep looking at the list of people that are missing, and they're missing, and we're working to rescue them. I keep looking at that list, and I see not just friends that I have, but friends that have sons. I look at a list of a retired captain who's one of the most phenomenal captains we've ever had, John Vigiano, who's missing a son who was on the fire department and a son who was an ESU as a police officer. That is typical of that list that we're working from. It is just horrible. I have never had anything like this to deal with, and I'm sure I never will again. As difficult.